All right, I now call this December 5th, 2025 meeting into order. Sorry. All right, we will start with the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the Students' Union operates on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and the Neutral Peoples. This land is part of the Haldimand Tract, which was promised to the Six Nations, and we recognize the enduring presence of Indigenous peoples on this territory. Moving on to the conflicts of interest. Are there any conflicts of interest to declare? Alrighty. Moving on to, may I have a motion? Wait, sorry, I have to tell you about the regrets. We have received regrets from Director Murphy. As of this moment, I believe Director Ward is on his way, so let's not mark him as absent yet. And are there any conflicts of interest? I already said that. We're good. Can I have a motion on the Board of Directors adopt the agenda as presented? Motion by Vice Chair Ferguson, seconded by Director Anas. Is there any discussion on the matter? No? Okay, let's proceed to voting. All those opposed? All those in favor? I changed the order today, guys. I changed the order. Okay, all those in favor. Come on, guys. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Motion passes 0 to 9. I'm guessing no one here is abstaining. Okay. I guess we're having a presentation from the Freedom of Expression and Academic Freedom Task Force. We thank you all for coming today. This is a full house, so we're happy to have you. Who's taking it away? Hello.
Thanks very much, and thanks for having us here, and thanks for all the task force members who are here today to answer questions, and I really appreciate everyone's time. So thank you. I have been voted the spokesperson of the task force, and so yeah, exactly. So I am here. I know that we have 45 minutes, and so or not 40 minutes. So what I'm going to do is to quickly take you through a deck focusing on the parts that are relevant to students and also where we would really appreciate your guidance and discussion. So I will make this, my hope is to make this about 10 minutes. And then we can focus in, go back to slides if that's what interests you to focus our discussion and so forth. So again, big thanks to all of you and also the task force. This has been about a year, just about exactly a year that we've been working on this. Sorry. When did I mute myself? Everyone okay? I'm just doing preamble stuff. Okay. The last thing I would like to say before I get into the deck is we were able to share the work yesterday, and I appreciate that it's a long document. I think it's 27 pages, and we don't expect that you had a chance to look at it, especially since this is exam period right now. So this is consider this the first engagement with students, if that's all right. And we're happy to come back. We're happy to also hear from you what would be the best ways of engaging more students, right? Both undergraduate and graduate students. Okay, so background. This goes right to our act, right? Which is legislation. That our goal, the act sets out our objects of the university, which is basically the goals, the mission. which is the pursuit of learning through scholarship, teaching, and research within a spirit of free inquiry and expression. That's what we are all about, right? That's always important to keep in mind because that is what our mission is. So back in 2017-18, there was a Freedom of Expression Task Force, and they came up with a statement that's on the web, which is, I think, really important. If you haven't had a chance to look at it, please do so. But that is mostly about, indeed, entirely about freedom of expression. And that's one of the things that's really important, the difference between freedom of expression and academic freedom. And that's actually one of the things we're going to talk about today. So since that time, and in fact, even more so recently in the past, say 2 to 3 years, there's been calls for clarity from the community about a couple of issues in particular. So indeed, what is the difference between academic freedom and freedom of expression? The second one is, given what a university is and our act, should we be making statements about world events, for example, or things that are happening around us? And that gets at the heart of whether an institution is neutral or whether we should just be practicing restraint in the kinds of comments and statements that we make. So that's another thing that the community wanted. The third thing, and this is where in particular I think student interest comes to play, is there sometimes can be tension between academic freedom of faculty and the students' experiences within the classroom and outside the classroom. So that's a big one, and we really focus a lot of attention on that as a task force. And then finally, questions about freedom of expression for staff members, because staff have very particular roles, especially they have freedom of expression. They do not have academic freedom, and sometimes some of the different roles that people play can end up making it a bit confusing. So that's what we heard. Next slide, please. Right. So this is something I'll share with you later. This basically is a Coles Notes version as to the difference between academic freedom and freedom of expression. I don't want to get into the details. Now, there's lots but long and short of it is that freedom of expression, everybody has that as a citizen or as a member in Canada, right? Someone who's living in Canada. It's basically what your democratic rights are to have your speech heard by others and actually say what you think about things. There's only a few things that would curtail that. One of them is like hate speech, threats, defamation, legal stuff, right? The second is on the university context. Sometimes the university will need to say, hey, you can do this, but just not at like 4 in the morning because other people need to sleep. So it's basically managing different people's rights. And then finally, sometimes like in a particular staff role, right, your job is to be, say, to have a welcoming environment for all who enter your office, right? So if you're putting a lot of stuff on, say, Facebook, or you're standing on a soapbox saying, down with, right, whoever a particular group is, then that's not making a very welcoming place for students who are of that group, right? So those are the only limitations on that. Academic freedom is something that faculty and librarians have only. It's actually a contractual thing, right? So it's part of the job description. It's part of the contract that faculty and librarians sign. And that's whether you are full-time, tenured track, or contract teaching faculty. And there's 4 elements of that, and we'll talk about that later, but it has to, again, go back to the acts or the objects of the university. So research, teaching, you can criticize the university, and you can do whatever you want, basically, in having basically the stuff that's in freedom of expression, that you can say whatever you want and not be curtailed. Okay, next slide. All right, so our mandate was then to look at our existing policies, make sure that that we know what we actually talk about in our policies and collective agreements and so forth, to provide guidance and recommendations to clarify these policies as needed, especially as the university responds to issues related to one or the other, academic freedom or freedom of expression. And then finally, to provide guidance recommendations regarding what we might do in the future to make things a little bit clearer, better, whether that's staffing, a different structure, education for our community, because these are very complicated issues. And in fact, there is no easy solution to sometimes the conflict that exists between different elements within the interplay of academic freedom and freedom of expression. Okay, next slide. So we did 3 areas of focus, and this goes back to what we heard. So the institutional restraint versus neutrality, right? What should our position, Laurier's position, be with respect to making statements, official statements on current events, and that even goes down to the faculty and the department level. We added that. The next one is the one that I think is will be really interesting to you, and this is freedom to learn. So what is Laurier's position with respect to protecting our students' right to learn, particularly where concerns are raised about potential conflicts with academic freedom? It's a big one, right? And freedom to learn is something that not many universities in Canada actually have a policy about freedom to learn. So this is a little bit new and exciting. But at the same time, there's very little that actually is new in terms of the content. Instead, it's a way of bringing together the policies that already exist in a way that actually focuses the attention on your right to learn. And then finally, as I talked about that, if you're a staff member and you're also a CTF, or a staff member and also a student, and that's what we're calling the two hats issue. Okay, next slide. So institutional restraint. I'm not going to focus on that today at the moment because I want to get right to the student to learn, but there's a lot here that I'd be very happy to talk to you about in the future. But long and short of it is there are only very specific reasons that we feel the university should be making statements. And it's about our core mission, right? So whether there's a threat to our institutional autonomy, our academic freedom, or something that happens nearby. And I'm thinking a great example, not a great example, but an example of this is what happened at the University of Waterloo a few years ago in the stabbing in a classroom. That would be an example of when we did say something, and it would make sense, we think, it makes sense to say something. But by and large, we don't say anything because saying anything is likely then to alienate someone else in our community. At the same time, it's really, really important for the care that we have for our community to actually be shown through. And I think the way that it's put into our document is there's more impactful ways of actually showing care for our community than making a statement. And it's really important for us to be focusing our attention on that. Okay, to the next slide. Oh no, it's too small. Okay. This is in the document that was shared with you yesterday. So you have a copy of this. I strongly encourage you to look at the page that actually has this. It's in Appendix D, I think it is. But sorry, I use that expression too much. In a nutshell, the freedom to learn has 3 main things, and this is what's in the center, and that is that students should have the freedom to pursue scholarly interests that you have, that you have the freedom to develop capacity for critical judgment, which puts you in charge of your own decision making, and you're not force-fed or fed something to believe this. Instead, you get to think for yourself. You should be developing the capacity to think for yourself and make your own decisions. And finally, the freedom to take reasoned exception to what is being said around you. So in particular in the classroom. And this is a weird one, so just a few words about it. Say somebody says something like, the world is flat, right? My teacher says the world is flat, and I'm a student in the classroom. I can take exception to that, meaning I can argue against that. I cannot believe that. I don't have to believe it, right? But I need to provide evidence. It can't just be like, well, I don't like that. And then the teacher says, well, I do, and I don't. It shouldn't get into a shouting match, right? Instead, it should be arguments. It's like there is evidence that the earth is not flat. And that's what I would, as a student, taking reasoned exception to what is being I think I touch it, right? And then I get excited and I touch the microphone, it makes it mute. Okay, thank you. So those are the three key things, and how those three things that are the freedom to learn end up making their way into what that looks like in a university is access to education. So the fact that you have if you want to, if you have if you have met the entry requirements, the entrance requirements, and I'm speaking specifically about undergraduate here, then you should have access to the education, to those freedoms, right? Secondly, in the curriculum, I'm going to see if these glasses are X-ray vision so I can read this. The freedom of inquiry and expression. That's what that should look like within the curricular. So inside the classroom, or if you're a graduate student with your advisor. Fair academic evaluation is the second one. But these glasses are pretty good, but they're not that good, right? And then also protection against improper disclosure, right? So that your grades, for example, are not. So there's certain freedoms that you have there. Oh my gosh, thank you. Okay, we'll share this one. And then along with the extracurricular, there's the freedom of association, that you can participate in student government and organizations. That's your freedom to make those choices. Freedom of inquiry and expression outside the classroom or outside the supervisory relationship. And then also, of course, freedom of student press, right? Is that there should be absolutely no censorship for student newspapers and so forth, and radio opinion pieces, whatever the case may be. Now, with those three, the curricular access to education, extracurricular things, with those freedoms, there are three different, then we're moving to the blue on the screen. Students have academic responsibilities related to those freedoms, right? So if you're going to have the freedom to do all of these things, then you need to, for example, not engage in academic misconduct, and think about those around you in the classroom if you're having a heated discussion about deeply held beliefs. So basically all of the sorts of things that are pretty natural and in fact are already part of our policies and so forth. The faculty themselves and supervisors also have responsibilities, right? And that's assigning relevant work that's relevant to the course and the degree requirements, right? So obvious stuff. Ensuring fair evaluation, and that's why we have a petitions process to ensure that that actually does occur. Refraining from abuse of podium or indoctrination. This one is actually a really interesting one because this is not actually really clearly spelt out in any of our policies or documents right now. So we really are interested in hearing what you think and what the whole community thinks about this, because we would have to beef up language. Right now, the only way that what a faculty member says or does in the classroom or outside, primarily inside the classroom, it would actually have to be a violation of policy 6.1, which is the toxic workplace, toxic learning environment policy. There would have to be a violation of that in order for, which is pretty serious stuff. When academic freedom comes against that, it's actually pretty unlikely that unless it was something like, again, hate speech or something like that. So really interested in hearing what you have to think about, what you think about that. And then finally, there are institutional responsibilities that go with those as well. Hillary. Have I misspoken?
No, yeah. So I just wanted to elaborate. It says refrain from abusive podium, which makes it sound, Heidi, obviously 6.1
Yeah.
makes it sound much more horrendous. But I believe this also points to the fact that professors have to teach, the calendar description. So
Yes.
the idea
Good.
is that if you have a professor who spends 50% of the course or the lecture time going on about some pet peeve of his or hers, that is, I would think we would agree, it's abuse of podium, right? 5 minutes at the start of an hour and a half class, maybe, but they should be teaching to the subject area and to what the syllabus covers. I just wanted to.
Thank you so much for that, Hillary. I don't like to think of this that you're the guinea pigs for this presentation, but you are the first time through this. So I really appreciate that, Hillary, because it's absolutely right. Abusive indoctrination. In fact, there's a whole bunch of things that are tied up in that. Indoctrination is you must believe this or you will fail, right? And in fact, that's not the case. You have to be able to repeat it back on a test, but you don't have to believe it, right? There's an interesting distinction there. There's the one about how much time you're spending on particular topics, especially if it's political or something like that. It could also be like what I did my last summer vacation. That's also abuse of podium, right? It's not fulfilling the contract, the terms of your contract to be teaching, right? Plus then, yes, the 6.1 stuff. So thank you. Okay, so then the institution then has a number of responsibilities as well, which is basically to ensure that these things happen, right? One note before I move into the next slide, because I'm already over, I'm sorry, is the task force has discussed and recognizes that we have more work to do for the distinction between undergraduate and graduate students right now, because there are many nuances. And in fact, I'm happy to report that even late last week at the Senate meeting, a number of different roles and responsibilities were delineated and described and passed by FGPS and grad faculty council that have gone through Senate. So we'll be able to then merge that through some of our documents over the next months to make that clearer. So that's to come, some of those fine distinctions. Finally, we have to the next slide, the two hats issue. Which is, again, a big thanks to Brandon for the work on this, again, there's nothing new here, but it's about clarifying what should the institution do? How should the staff members think about the fact that they may have be wearing two hats at particular times, both a staff member as well as a CTF or student? Because a staff rights and responsibilities are very much according to the role, whereas CTF, as a contract teaching faculty, you have academic freedom. So it might seem like there's a conflict, but in fact, the document that's been put together, I think, makes it clear that you have freedom to choose. It's just that there's responsibilities and accountabilities that go with both those roles. Okay. So to the next slide, which is basically our last slide. So the next steps is a lot of talking with our community, which is you're the first ones. And I thank you for that again. We are very open to many revisions. We want to hear what you have to say. Eventually, the idea is to take it to Senate for approval, so that this ends up becoming a thing, right, that we can point to. And so the particular questions for today, and in fact with the whole community, is does it make sense for us to try to work on stronger language with respect to the indoctrination abuse of podium stuff? Because that's actually going to be something that would have to be in conversation with our faculty unions. It's a big deal, but we're willing to do that work if it makes sense to do that, right? And if the community wants us to do that. The next is whether we should have a standing committee to advise primarily the provost and the president and others around the institution about these issues, freedom of, because they can be very complicated. It's basically each side has rights, right? And they conflict. And there's no easy way to resolve this. And so it needs to be very nuanced with people who have a kind of expertise. So that's another question. And then finally, how best to engage from your perspective, how best for us to engage with the larger undergraduate, graduate student community at Laurier about the task force work, basically a version of what I've given here today, but also thinking about for the future. One of the things that really struck me before this task force was formed was actually some conversations with grad students. And I realized that actually there's great confusion about the difference between academic freedom and freedom of expression. So what are your ideas, if you think it's important for us to be considering as we think educational opportunities for the community? And then I already mentioned that we still have work to do on grad students. So sorry, it took me a bit longer to get through that, but lots of work has been done, lots of conversations, and I'm very happy to hear your thoughts. Oh, I'm Heidi Northwood. I forgot to say that. I'm, I'm provost, but I'm on academic leave right now. Trish McLaren is acting provost. I'm chair of this committee. Sorry. I forget. Yes.
Okay, everyone, thank you so much, Heidi. I will state that I sit on Senate, and Heidi's actually my chair, so it's fun. We'll say. Okay, I guess you're expecting for some sort of discussion from us
Yeah, what
specifically?
do you think?
Okay.
Like very free flowing. And again, we're happy to come back. I'm happy to come back, even if it needs to be virtual, if the conversation, if you'd like it to continue in for different way. There's not a lot of time today, so this could be first time.
Thank you. Okay, guys, I will say that as students, we do need to think about freedom, and as student representatives especially. Do you guys have any ideas? What do you guys think so far? I'm opening it to the floor. Yes, Lucas.
I'm wondering if like the scope of this task force would cover something like Francis Widdowson speaking on campus and what that looks like with this task force in terms of what we just spoke about.
Indeed. Does anyone on the task force want to, I've been saying a lot. Does anyone want to talk about how that?
Curious if the scope of this task force would cover an event like the Francis Widdowson event and the kind of turmoil that caused with Indigenous students on campus.
Okay, I'll say a few things, but just as Hillary did, like jump in, please. So indeed, that is a really good example of when there is a conflict between academic freedom and freedom of expression and students' right to learn. So from the perspective of academic freedom, it's actually relatively clear that the faculty who invited Francis Widdowson to come were completely within their rights to do so for academic freedom. Also, because Francis Widdowson is an academic, even though she is no longer employed, she has academic credentials. So it's very much a strong case for academic freedom that talk could continue. Now, I know that there's been some complications recently about Francis Widdowson being trespassed at the University of Victoria. I don't know if you're aware of that. And that's actually a different kind of, that one's complicated. Actually, I'm quite interested to hear what the courts have to say about whether or not they could trespass her before she did anything. So that one's a little bit contentious, but that's all very clear-ish cut, that she could come, she could give a talk, she was invited by academics, it's their freedom to do so as academic freedom. But that totally caused harm, right? And so the question is, with freedom to learn and even the policy 6.1 about toxicity, that's an example of, well, where does that line, what does that look like for students, right? And how can we help the students if that has to be allowed to occur, which it was allowed to occur because it was academic freedom, how can we better support, how can we support our students to either engage in a way that makes sense to them, to do a counter protest, to support in whatever way the students feel and want to respond, right? It's very much, and this it is a very good example of when you have competing freedoms and competing rights and the importance of caring, right, for community and making sure that people are not hurt in a way that doesn't help, right, or at least open up possibilities that weren't there before. The other thing that's in the background here, and this is something that the task force has grappled with and will probably continue to grapple with, is what I often think of as bad faith, right? So it's one thing to actually try to get a view out there to see whether it makes sense and have people debate it and discuss and even, argue passionately about it. But that's very different from provocateurism, right? Where it's basically just a political statement that is being, and there's nothing that we can really do about it, but even the understanding and naming it for what it is, I think can be helpful. Does any task force members? Yeah, please go ahead, Taylor. Oh, and Andrea.
Thanks Heidi and Taylor. I'm Andrea Davis. I'm Associate Vice President, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. Thank you so much for that question. And the task force thought about these issues carefully and decided that what is important is once we have a set of policies or guidelines, is applying those absolutely, I want to say ruthlessly, fairly across the board. Because in exercising, say, out of, a desire to minimize what might be potential harm against one group of students and saying, well, Frances Widdowson can't come, there might be another speaker on the opposite side of that spectrum whose ideas grounded in reason, fact, all of those things could also upset another group. So we don't want to create the space, those kind of binary spaces where it's either or. At the same time, recognizing that example in particular, but others have serious, real impact. Even within classrooms, learning, students are coming with their own lived experiences out of their own context and are exposed to ideas that are different from their own for the first time. That can be really difficult, even traumatic. It doesn't mean that the professor doesn't have the right to express those things. We would want our faculty members to take all of that into account as they teach, as they share, as they understand that students are growing, but all of them may not. So as an institution, when it comes down to institutional rights, I think as a university, we have to continue to think about how we mitigate that harm, or how we care for students who could be and can be and are often impacted. And often these are marginalized, racialized, or otherwise, students. So that is and that work happens I'm saying informally because it's not in policy anywhere. So Darren's office intervened during that instance. The Center for Student Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion intervened, and so on. But thank you for putting that on the table and reminding us that we need to continue to hold those tensions in really careful ways.
Yeah.
I think I'm also maybe curious about the task force definition or operational definition, differentiating like disinformation versus like misinformation. Like if it's something that it's like, if I say the earth is flat versus like, what is causing harm? And then also potentially, what is the task force position on, I know you said there's like not policy avenues, like that it isn't formalized in terms of like community care work, but I was wondering if there is even like a skeleton model of like, when these things happen, like how do we engage like the Indigenous student community to mitigate harm?
There's part of that. Yeah. Sure. Hi, everybody. Whoa, am I on? Yes. Taylor Coleman, President and CEO of our Graduate Students Association and task force member. I think I can address part of this. I think a skeleton, we talked a lot about the tension. The institutional restraint plays a really big role in this because by having any sort of narrative about an event going on campus, that opens you up to be expected to have narratives about all things going on campus in any political direction. So that's why it's so focused on institutional mission and values right now. And we talked a lot about the need to show the care for community in a different way. And so I think a skeleton model is something that we as a task force could consider recommending to the community and to the university to work on. So that's certainly something. When it comes to disinformation and misinformation, one thing that we talked a lot about is the responsibility of this institution to prepare students to critically think about the things presented to them. So that means educating them on what could something like disinformation look like? What could something like misinformation look like? What are high quality information, data, idea sources like peer-reviewed quality journals? How do we assess bias in those journals? What is the balance of appreciating and understanding the experiences of the community in this? There's a responsibility of this institution to teach the students to engage critically with the ideas presented to them in their education. So we're spending lots of time talking about that and figuring out maybe how that fits into that institutional responsibility of our WLUFA contract, our WLUFA members and our CTF members, and really thinking about that language and that responsibility and that commitment that needs to be sometimes more clearly articulated. And also understanding, I think, Andrea and I talk sometimes about how do we create professional development opportunities to also add to this? Like what kind of skills workshops can we bring, and how can we engage students outside of the classroom to engage with these ideas that protect their peace, allow them to engage critically, and also help them perhaps move through ideas that are new or unsettling or in ways that support their well-being and also help develop their critical thinking skills. So that's, I think, where we've largely, anybody feel free to jump in and correct me on that, but.
We do have a question from Vanessa as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Vanessa Barassa. I'm the Director of Issues Management and Communications and a member of the task force. And before we move on from this topic, I just wanted to let it not be lost that although we may not have like a framework or some specific guidelines when it comes to, care for our community, we care for our community. I would say that Laurier has a variety of supports in place and resources in place to care for our students and our staff and faculty. So I didn't want that to be lost and think that like we don't have that in place already. It's one of the very first things we think of when there is a situation like this. And we want to make sure that there are resources in place to care for those that might be upset or harmed. So I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you. Director Ward and then Nathan. We're both muted. It's great. Director Ward, I think your mic is off. Okay. Okay, until Director Ward is working, I think there was a question from that side. Yeah, Dr. Pimplott.
Yes, sorry. Like Heidi, I didn't properly introduce myself. So my name's Hilary Pimlott. I'm a professor in the Department of Communication Studies. I also teach in Women and Gender Studies. Two things. First of all, with Frances Widdowson at University of Victoria, and this relates in a way to Laurier and other universities, except for Alberta. University campuses are not considered public property. So your rights to freedom of expression, freedom of association, and other rights under the charter are in the public sphere, like in the public square, walking down the street, anywhere that's public property. Universities have this right to manage their property. Frances Widdowson, Jim McMurtry, and 1BC, a right-wing party, Dallas Brody, an MLA, they did not go through the proper channels. So UVic said, you didn't go through the proper channels, you don't have a right to actually hold this meeting. And so that's how UVic as an institution handled that situation. The other thing I would just say is I've been studying disinformation, misinformation, malinformation for many years now. One of my concerns I've raised with the task force, but we haven't really talked about this. I feel fairly strongly that for university students, undergraduate and graduate, the campus is a place for your freedom of expression outside of classroom in those areas where academic freedom, your course, exams, whatever, exist. But again, your student union leadership, Graduate Student Association, determines that to a certain extent. My concern is when groups of professors, most of whom with little background in a subject area, bring people onto campus, some of whom are known for producing disinformation, as has happened in the not too distant past, very recently actually. And I have concerns. One could speculate what the intention of that is, whether it's to have an open debate or whether it's really to push a particular agenda. What I would add more broadly, though, is that one of the concerns, and I'm glad you raised disinformation, is there's been a whole history since the rise of so-called political correctness claims on US campuses in the late 1980s, early 1990s, where it's used in order for conservative-minded individuals to be canceled from holding a talk in order to then hold themselves up as martyrs to free speech. And that's where I think when Heidi was saying about being cautious about intervening on some of these issues, it can be a bit of a awkward or difficult position to take on the part of the university. However, as a professor in a particular subject area, I have a right to, talk about X, Y, and Z, but I don't have a background like in economics. I can participate if something is, people want to have invitation to talk about that, but I don't have a background in economics. And so there becomes a bit of an issue around expertise and whether what professors are doing are part of, I'm not saying this is not what the task force necessarily sees. This is just my own personal perspective, that I have some queries about what do we do in situations if I teach in communication studies and somebody brings on people onto campus who have no background or expertise in communications, and they bring somebody putting forward really out-of-date theories that have been demonstrated to be false or not workable. Well, why aren't communication studies professors being consulted on that, right? So does that make sense? Sorry, I'm not sure. Yeah? So that's just, and so I'm saying there's a lot of gray areas here because you don't want to stop others from raising concerns or issues. And we all have rights as residents in Canada to raise questions. But it's just, this is one of the things that I'm still trying to work through myself. Sorry to go on.
Thank you, Dr. Pimlott. I believe Director Ward has left us a question in the chat. Your glasses are back.
Yes.
Okay.
Um,
Can you see it?
yes, I'm gonna try. You're not laser focused, but all right. My question was regarding how we would handle a case such as the recent one in Ohio, where an essay regarding sexual identity that heavily referenced religion, God, secular arguments, and didn't have strong critical engagement with the actual assignment received a 0. Then the professor was put on leave. How do we balance those rights internally? And I hope we wouldn't take similar action. Yes.
I'm happy to have a task force member answer that. I can give it a stab, but Andrea? Or
So it's likely to depend on the context is going to be the answer to that question. And so usually when there's an assignment, we expect professors to provide rubrics and to provide a basis for marking the assignment. And so if it was marked in accordance with the assignment instructions, there's not much I think the university would do in that circumstance. If, however, it was an abuse of the podium, which is where I think that concept comes in, we may have policies that would come into play there. Students also have petitions, and so they could petition the grade on the grounds that it was done in a way that wasn't in accordance with the assignment or the instructions, and therefore was not a legitimate grading concern. So I think we would be less concerned, I think as in not speaking for the whole institution or even the task force, we want to always engage with these thoughts not with the content of the essay and not with the content of what's in concern that may be controversial, we want to engage at the level of procedure and make sure that the proper procedure was followed. So the more we disengage from the content, the less likely we fall into kind of the censorship, against people's free speech or academic freedom rights, and the more that we focus on the process, that's going to answer the question better. Oh, sorry, I'm Brandon Metal. I'm an assistant professor at the Lazaridis School and on the task force as well.
This is Andrea Davis. Pardon me? I'm good. I think this goes back to what Heidi talked about, students having the right to take reasoned exception. That reasoned exception should follow the guidelines of an assignment laid out. So reasoned exception is not based on, my own personal feelings or ideology. It's based on research, evidence, peer-reviewed, and if an assignment says provide 4 peer-reviewed articles, then you have to follow the guidelines of the assignment. And if you don't do that, and you're going to social media or you join articles from the National Post to defend your ideas, and a professor is totally in their right to say you did not meet the standard of the assignment, and our processes at Laurier would protect that professor's right. In the same way, if the student followed all of those guidelines and felt that they were assessed unfairly, there are processes for the student to take exception to that grade.
This is an indication of a student named Samantha Fulnecki at Oklahoma University, not Ohio, who purposely wrote, at least according to, I've read the rubric for the assignment, excuse me. I've looked at the article they were supposed to read. This is all shared online. Turning Point USA, Oklahoma University promoted this because the graduate teaching instructor, so just a TA, either doing an MA or PhD, is a trans woman, or at least trans. And this was to target this particular individual, it appears. It has all the hallmarks that Oklahoma University did what it shouldn't have done. The governor was involved almost right away. So I would just encourage you to go look up Oklahoma University, Samantha Fulnecki, Fulnecky. You will see the way it's discussed and talked about. The instructor also had another instructor provide feedback to the student. It was actually, if you read the feedback, it was quite fair. The student failed to meet anything in the rubric that they were asked to do. And some people say, well, she cited the Bible. Well, she didn't actually cite the Bible. There's no citations, but she quotes her interpretation or understanding of the Bible, which is a very different thing. And there are ways you can cite or quote the Bible. I'm not a Christian and I'm not a believer in Bibles, but I do see it as a historical document that can be cited in arguments. So all of this is to say, I really encourage you to look at it, because to the question earlier about disinformation, this is exactly what this was done for, is to attack trans people in the university, I think, from what I can see from the direction. And the university played right along with it. Anyways, sorry, I've gone on again.
Thank you, Dr. Pimlott. Nathan has had his hand up, so we'll go with Nathan and then Dr. Shigano, and then we should wrap this up. So, Nathan?
Yeah. One of my things that I kind of think about is around the use of the word like neutrality. I'm thinking specifically around like the university making statements. And like I come from a more kind of activist school of thought around the idea of like our silence condones violence, because it absolutely does. And how decisions will be made about like what affects the like community at large in order to make statements. Like I think about the rising anti-trans movements, and me as a trans student, like that does affect me. That does affect me going like onto campus and whatnot. And I don't tend to see a lot of those statements being made and very like explicitly. So I just think the idea and the use of the word neutrality bugs me, because in not saying things, like the university is saying things, and I've actually, like, I did my master's research around this. And like the data is very clear about this idea of when we don't speak, that in and of itself speaks volumes. And so I just personally have a lot of concerns around not only the use of the word neutral, because I don't think that exists, but also if like the university is going that route, how are the decisions even being made in the first place about like, well, this affects our community, and who's actually included in that community and how it's being affected.
I'll say a few things about that, Nathan. This is Heidi Northwood speaking, and I'm happy to open it up to the task force for a few things. So we had decided as a task force actually not to make a statement about institutional neutrality, but because our institution actually, I'm going to leave this to Brandon because his language was very good in our preamble document. But instead, where we are, we came down on the idea of principled institutional restraint. So, and because restraint versus neutrality, as you say, do mean different things. And so, Brandon, I'm going to pass it over to you, given that you're so good with the language of this and the distinctions.
Okay, it's Brandon Meadow again on the task force. So yes, we deliberated this exact point and decided on the word restraint versus neutrality. There was some debate and different viewpoints that were discussed on this. And so we recognized that silence may be seen as making a statement, so we thought restraint was more appropriate. That being said, there is a view that the institution should not be making statements. Because although we can envision like kind of the cases that we may agree with lots of people on, that would, by making a statement, we are going to be ostracizing people who would disagree with those viewpoints. So the general idea is that as an institution, it's the members that say things, and we have an open discourse in that respect, and that the institution should be restrained in making statements. The second part of your question had to do with when does the university make statements? And we've come up with various criteria. There's a process in the consultation document starting at around page 14 out of the 29 pages. And so we're looking at things like whether or not the issue at play impacts the institution's autonomy, its governance, its operations, or its reputation directly. Whether it impacts community members' academic freedom, freedom to learn, or freedom of expression, and whether it's local and has a substantial impact on the university community. And so we're really trying to highlight kind of the scenarios in which the institution may think about making a statement by having very specific criteria we're looking at.
This is, I mean, a little bit of a larger question and doesn't need to be answered here, obviously. I mean, I'm happy to conversation after as well. But I think I'm, after this conversation, a little bit more interested in avenues for harm reduction and harm mitigation, maybe above all else. And I'm wondering, number one, is that outside the scope of the task force? And number two, you mentioned recommending policy that was like ruthlessly applied to protect academic freedom and freedom of expression, which if that's the position, that's fine. I'm just wondering the inevitable harm that maybe comes with doing that. Are there avenues for that? And I know, Vanessa, you said that there are avenues for care on campus. I'm also wondering, I think specifically my question and my intention is, I'm an Indigenous student, and I think the question that I posed about Francis Widdowson and the mitigation around that, a lot of the care may not have been centered in, it may have been centered in like a westernized view of care and approach to care, as opposed to like sitting in circle with Indigenous folks. I don't know because I wasn't there, but I just mean like, I wonder if there's like a framework for like, obviously it would change, it's malleable, like, you know, different people are affected by different things. But in specific for this one, like if something like this happened in the future, what is the approach to engaging meaningfully with Indigenous students? That's kind of my question there, and it doesn't have to be answered now. I understand that we're pressed for time.
I'm happy to. Oh, sorry, Andrea. Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I'm not going to try to answer except to say that this is a consultation, it's gathering information. This is very valuable, and we will take it back and make sure that it's part of the um, issues, concerns that we think about as we work towards a final document. Thank you.
Um, I'm gonna try. Thank you for that. I'm gonna try to cap it soon because we are going over time. I think Dr. Khattab wanted to say something and then quickly say something. Okay.
So I just had a quick question. Again, we do not have to answer it today, but just to keep it in mind, we did talk a lot about students kind of being able to critically engage with a lot of ideas, specifically in the classroom, and being able to access those freedoms that are available to them. And I think a big way that students are able to do that is through knowledge. But what I'm wondering now is the way syllabuses are structured and the way a lot of course content is that really allowing students to understand how they can critically engage with this material, or even if they are able to, like how are students able to find out, hey, these are my rights, these are my freedoms, I can do this, or this is what is within the scope of my rights and what I can and cannot practice. I know some courses, for example, they do offer options where they'll talk about theory and this is how we can properly engage with it. But in other courses, if you're, let's say, taking a statistics course, that's not really an option within the syllabus. So I'm wondering if you guys would have anything set in place or any policies to ensure that professors are allowing students to engage with those ideas, or if the task force is just going to do workshops to be able to present those ideas, if you guys have anything related to that.
Okay.
Just really quick. For the purposes of time, I will say something briefly on behalf of the committee. This is really helpful in actually hearing from you what you, so different course, every course is a little different, right? Some of them is you just hear some stuff you got to learn, right? And others one, this is much more of discussion based. This is actually a place where this is the perfect place to actually to be developing some of those critical thinking skills because of the subject matter of the course. Hearing from you as students what you think would be the best way to be engaging students so that they know they're about these freedoms and rights, and the fact that different courses, basically the differences that we've talked about today and engaging in this discussion. I'm from an institution way back before I came to Laurier that there was a thing called a core curriculum that everybody had to take a philosophy intro course where they learned how to do critical thinking, right? We don't have that here at Laurier, should we? Not that particular, but like should it be a workshop? Should there be workshops? Should it be part of orientation sessions? Should it be like so you got to take one of these 5 courses, and somewhere in one of these 5 courses you're going to get that kind of thing. That's what we love to hear from you about.
Okay, thank you so much. I will ask the Freedom and Expression Task Force to come to our meeting again in January, if possible. And I think then our students, our directors even have more opinions to share with you as well.
And you'll have the time for the 29.
And yes, definitely, definitely. Yes. Okay. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We're very happy to have you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Give them a little. So we're taking like a 1-minute recession. Three. Thank you. Okay. That was an incredibly long presentation. It was crazy. But it was fun. And I hope that we can. I think we're gonna be having them again in January. Yeah, it was a good discussion. So thank you guys. All right. Uh, we should get to the consent agenda, but before that, I think we need to make an amendment to the agenda to include Ryan's monitoring reports, which are included in the Teams folder. So, can I have a motion that the board approves an amendment to the agenda to include Ryan's monitoring reports? Motion by Director Khattab, seconded by Director Anas. Is there any discussion on the matter? No, okay, then let's proceed to voting. All those opposed? All those against? Oh wait, all those abstaining. Sorry, guys. All those abstaining. Okay. And all those in favor. Motion passes 0-0-2-8. Okay, perfect. I guess we should discuss Ryan's monitoring reports. Any discussions? No. Okay. Moving on to the consent agenda. Can I have a motion that the board adopt the consent agenda as presented? Motion by Dr. O'Leary, seconded by Dr. Shigano. Is there any discussion on the matter? No? Okay, then let's proceed to voting. All those opposed? All those abstaining? And all those in favor? Motion passes 0-0-8. Oh, Dr. Zhao is back. Welcome back, Dr. Zhao.
Sorry, I thought I'm supposed to join the in camera session.
No, not yet. We're not there yet.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Okay, so I completed the monitoring reports on BMD 2D1, GP 2B, 2C, 2D, and 2E. Is there any discussion on those? On my monitoring reports? No? Oh, you guys trust me with like policy? It's crazy. I made like a little like condition there that like if you guys just pass it, then I get all your money. All right, then can I have I guess we need to approve that. So that's been approved. All right, then let's proceed to the meeting minutes from last meeting. So can I have a motion that the board of directors approve the meeting minutes from the November 21st, 2025 meeting? Motion by Dr. Shigano, seconded by Director Khattab. Is there any discussion on the matter? No, then let's proceed to voting. All those opposed, all those abstaining, and all those in favor? Dr. Ward? Motion passes 0-0-9. Do you guys like the gavel? All right, comments from the chair. That was a long meeting, sorry. It was a long presentation. Okay, I'd like to thank you all for a great semester, and I thank you all for the discussion that all of you posed today. I hope that we'll be even more prepared for January. As well, today's our board dinner, just to thank you all for the amazing work that you've done. I can't wait to see how that goes. Manjot, you're also invited. Please do attend. And President Jovi, you're also invited. We were hoping for such treat by you'll do.
Wow.
Okay, and with that, let's move on to President Jovi's comments.
Well, thank you for passing it off to me after that. Yeah, unfortunately, Satchpreet couldn't be here this week, so you guys are stuck with me. Yeah. Nice to see you all here. Happy last board meeting of the term. Hope you guys are all feeling well and prepped for your exam season. And I'm wishing you all the best as you enter the last stage of this term. So don't worry, finish line is in sight. You guys are going to do great. In terms of what's been going on in mine and our world recently, last week, Shayok, my Vice President of Government and Stakeholder Relations, and I were at Student Advocacy Conference, which is where from Sunday to Thursday, him and I and other schools that are part of USA, which is the Ontario Undergraduate Student Alliance, were in Toronto at Queen's Park lobbying to politicians. So USA, the Ontario Undergraduate Student Alliance, prepared 3 policy briefs with various recommendations to put forward to government officials to advocate for student needs on various things. And those are policy briefs I'm happy to share the advocacy priorities that we had brought forward to government officials. As a quick synopsis, we focused on strengthening Ontario's workforce, meeting post-secondary demand, and student and community safety as kind of the overarching topics of our advocacy priorities and recommendations. So as mentioned, from Monday to Thursday, him and I and various other members from students' unions that are part of USA had meetings with MPPs, with ministers, with staffers of ministers to bring these advocacy priorities forward and hope that we can bring forward some actionable change in favor of undergraduate students and also the general community. So that was a really amazing experience. It was really cool to bring forward those issues to those folks, and really hoping to have some follow-up meetings with those politicians to bring forward some actionable change. In the interest of advocacy, I also want to share that Shyok and I and the rest of his team are looking forward to local advocacy week and federal advocacy week that we have upcoming in the winter term. So those are opportunities to, again, advocate to both local and federal politicians about needs that we want for students. The information on those specific dates to come, because we're definitely looking for some community participation for topics of discussion for local advocacy week. But I'm sure he would be happy to speak more on that at a board meeting if that is something that you are interested in. In regards to the Academic Freedom and Freedom of Expression Task Force, we're very thankful that you guys were inviting them and having them speak at this board meeting. As a member of that task force, I know I've been really wanting to push those student consultations and really get your student voice. And I really appreciated all of the questions that you guys had brought forward, because I think your voices are really what is going to drive that. And ultimately, all of the work of that task force is going to be reflected on your student experience. And so your guys' input on that is very important. And I'm sure they would be very happy again to come back in January to continue to entertain those conversations. Specifically, that question at the end, Kenzie, really what I have been trying to drive forward with that task force and look for is how we can really meet the students where they're at with that stuff, right? Like policy will continue to exist, but how can we meaningfully engage with students to get them to understand what their rights are, and how can they be participatory in deciding what they want to see on their student experience? So again, any of that kind of participation that we can have when they come to that January meeting would be really helpful, and we would really appreciate that. In terms of more consultations that group is having, we are having two more in the coming weeks, one in Waterloo and one in Brantford. So looking forward to that. In terms of some hiring updates, I can confirm that the vice president gaps that we have are officially closed. So I am so happy to announce that the new vice president of student affairs is Kate McCrae Bristol. She is currently the director of athletics, but she will be taking the step up to the VPSA position as of January 1st. And for the vice president of finance and administration, we are very pleased to welcome Debbie Martin. She had recently retired from McMaster University after over 30 years of experience at that institution, and she is very excited at the opportunity to work here at Laurier. So very happy and excited that those gaps have been filled, and we have a full executive leadership team with the strong presence of those folks. Yeah, knocking on wood that we have that full team. But as someone who sat on both of those hiring committees, I have absolute strong faith that both of those candidates will meet and surpass the expectations that we have for them in those roles. They're both very phenomenal individuals, and I am excited for them to enter the role and wish them only the best as they commence at the beginning of January. In terms of some other hiring updates, I am also happy to announce the Dean of Science hiring is finally complete with the acclamation of Dr. Rochelle Monahan. So congratulations to her, as she will also commence that role at the beginning of January. In terms of some projects, the really big project outside of consultation work is the SU 50th basketball night that we are going to be having next term. So every year SU gets to claim one of the basketball nights to have as like one of the ones that they're able to program around, promote, etc. And so January 16th will be this year's SU basketball night it is the doubleheader against Western University. So really looking forward to that. We have a lot of really cool things happening at that basketball event. So would really love to see all of you guys come out, participate, and enjoy. Again, in regards to student consultations, Shyok and I have some student consultation plans to come for next term to meet with students to kind of get a better understanding of what students' perceptions of our organization is like and how students interact with our organization, hoping to be able to fill the gaps with students who don't and kind of meet students where they're at again. And later today, I will be joining the City of Waterloo Roundtable for Youth Voices to discuss St. Patrick's Day. So just figured I would let you guys know that I am participating in that. Should be an interesting conversation. Last thing that I want to mention is position promotion. So as you guys know, nomination packages are out for all of our jobs. Woo! Isn't that crazy how fast the year has gone by? So the graphic for that has gone out. I also had a really good conversation with Manja yesterday to discuss promotional plans for my position, your positions, and also the VP positions. So there was already a preset marketing strategy outlined, and we are slowly curating a very intentional marketing plan over the next couple months to crank out some promotion for our jobs as we look to find people to replace us. I'm so sad. But yeah. So some videos and graphics about the positions to come out soon. But if you guys have any ideas that you want to promote these positions, we'd also be very happy to open to you guys to hear what you think. But that's me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Joby. I don't know why you're so happy about being replaced.
I am not happy. It has gone by too quick, I will say. You know, the summer had already gone by kind of fast, and I was like, it was kind of weird for the summer to go by quick. The year's only going to go by quicker, and I don't know. It felt like just the other day that I was looking at the nomination package post and being like, oh, now I have to do this. And here we are now looking to find our replacements. But I've had an absolute stellar first 8 months. And even though someone new will be nominated in less than 2 months, I am determined to finish off the rest of my term very strong. So sad, but excited at the opportunity to still have some time left.
Good answer. Okay, I guess on my end, is it all right for the next meeting if you could give us some opinions on what happened with the roundtable tonight on St. Patrick's?
Yes, I'm happy to provide a miniature debrief from today's meeting. Admittedly, also this is the first meeting regarding this discussion that I am participating in, so I don't know how fruitful the conversation will be. It'll probably be more of the introductory meetings, but I also see this being something that has some more scheduled times to discuss moving forward. But yes, I'm happy to discuss the outcome of that meeting.
Okay, and also more on the student consultations, the Shire.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And congratulations on the hiring committee, Sunday. Are there any discussions or questions for President Joby? No? Okay, I will say, have a good exam break. I was supposed to say that on my message as well. But he took it. He read my script. That's why. All right. Thank you, President Joby. And Phil?
Yeah, I don't have a ton to update, but I will echo the sentiments about the December exam schedule and well wishes, etc. And a very restful break for everybody when they come back in January. There are 5 things that I do need to update you on. Is we're continuing to work with the Graduate Students Association as well as the Department of Student Affairs and the VP Finance Office on what Seagram Co. ends up being, which is the special purpose vehicle, which will help secure the capital to ultimately build whatever ends up at 81 Seagram. I don't want to use the word stadium anymore because I don't think it's necessarily going to be a stadium as a stadium is defined, but whatever the facility is at 81 Seagram, we're still in the negotiating phase in terms of what that actually is going to look like and how that's going to get secured. But we're still very hopeful. We had a very productive conversation this past Wednesday. I think Wednesday, yep. And then we got another one in a couple of weeks because we recognize the importance of getting that stuff done so everything else can kind of, all the dominoes can fall in a timely fashion. Also met with, I don't actually know what her title is, so I'm going to call her the AVP of Facilities Asset Management, Ulrika Gross, regarding our operating procedures agreement. We're still in the process of trying to negotiate that. So it is our goal as an organization to be able to submit officially in writing some of our challenges on that document at the moment before the holiday break, so that when we get back in January, we can kind of address those issues head on and hopefully get to a signing process relatively quickly. It is worth noting that the board will have an opportunity to review that agreement before it gets signed, because we need you guys to say yes in order to sign it. So expect to see that hopefully in the second semester. Just a quick update on something that we've been dealing with and you guys are aware of. The air handling project is officially in the books. And a notification has gone out to the university community that the Fred Nichols Campus Center will be largely inaccessible as of May 1st through to August 15th while we work to get the air handling system in this building upgraded from its 1969 bones. So it's a repair long overdue. So we're looking forward to whatever that looks like. Hopefully better temperature and climate control in this building, because as I'm sure you've noticed at one time or another, it's always hot when you don't want it to be hot, and it's always cold when you don't want it to be cold. So fingers crossed, everybody. With that comes, we have discovered a communications gap with the university. We used to get a lot of university notifications, and we're able to kind of communicate that with our staff. So we're working with Laurier HR to get the Students' Union back into those communication channels so that we can kind of have notifications that impact staff and students. Parking, for example, elevator outages, et cetera. But the big one was they put out an announcement saying that the Fred Nichols Campus Center was going to be largely inaccessible from May 1st to August 15th, and forgot to tell us that. So that bit of a gap in the communication there. So we're working on it. Last, one of the big things that I'm working on with Chris Turner, the Director of Finance and Administration, and Tara Robinson, our Associate Director of Operations, working on a Wilkes business plan to put forward to the board. We're going to examine all the possibilities to try to kind of bring that business back to life. Not that it doesn't have life, but it's not exactly the site of the party anymore. So we're in the process of trying to build a plan that will help us make Wilkes a better focus and for the student experience, and bring back the truth behind the statement of Laurier lives here. And that's about it.
Thank you so much, Phil. Are there any questions for Phil at this time? No? Okay, thank you. Those were very lengthy updates, and I'm happy the air handling project is finally in the books. It has been a time with that one. All right, then we'll proceed to the DIC report. Okay, we did fall a bit behind schedule on the DICs. I think it was a bit hard to schedule a time, but the DIC report is now on EL2C and GP2G. Notable thing there is that there were no recommended changes. Are there any questions about that? No? Okay. Then we'll be proceeding to something even more fun. Another DIC election. Can I have a motion that, that we open up an election on the Direct Inspection Committee for EL2G and BMD2A? Motion by Dr. Anas, seconded by Vice Chair Ferguson. Is there any discussion on the matter? No. Then we'll proceed to voting. All those opposed? All those in favor? Motion passes 0-0 to 8. Yep, I did it backwards again, guys. This time, I did not do it intentionally. Earlier I did. Okay, so do I have any nominations to the DIC election for EL2C and for EL2G and BMD2A? Someone like to nominate themselves?
I'd like to nominate Director O'Leary.
Dr. O'Leary, do you stand? Dr. O'Leary stands. Perfect. Thank you. Are there any other? Yes? Dr. Anas? Dr. Anas also nominates himself. There we go. Good job, guys. We did it. Vice Chair Ferguson, do you stand? Do you nominate yourself? Vice Chair Ferguson nominates himself. Okay. I think you want to open the door? Thank you. All right. Guys, we can't fall behind the DIC schedule. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So, can I have a motion that the Board of Directors elects Directors O'Leary, Vice Chair Ferguson, and Director Anas, including the Chair, to the DIC Direct Inspection Committee for EL2G and BMD2A? Motion by Director Bilodeau, seconded by Director Shigano. Is there any discussion on the matter? No? Then we will proceed to voting. All those opposed? All those abstaining? And all those in favor? Motion passes 0-0 to 9. Thank you. All right, Direct Inspection Committee members, I will be in discussion with you this December, and hopefully we can have a report in by our first meeting of January. Okay, now can we move on to the winter meeting schedule? I'm hoping all of you guys have your winter schedules already done. We do need to set up a time for January. What days work best for everyone here? Okay, do you guys still want to keep the Friday at 1:30 p.m. for next? Okay, open up your schedules. Let's go. Yeah.
Do we have to have a decision made by schedule?
Not necessarily, but we need to have at least the January, like the first meeting of January, scheduled.
Oh, I think we could keep it for the same time as now, like the Fridays at 1:30 for the first meet of January, and then
Okay.
depending on people's winter schedules, because that tends to change, we could adjust accordingly.
Perfect. Thank you. Vice Chair Ferguson, you're gonna say something?
Yeah, no, I thought I thought my philosophy tutorial was gonna conflict, but it doesn't.
It doesn't? Okay. Dr. Zhao?
Um, I think I'll have a lecture at the time, but if it's only one meeting, it doesn't really matter. We can keep it as it is.
Okay, thank you. Lilo?
Thank you. I have class from 1 to 2:30 basically.
1 to 2:30 on that Friday? On the
Yeah, on Friday.
Okay.
Yeah, I could come right after. You guys are all free.
Friday at 2:30 is also not bad, right? Friday 2:30? No? No? Dr. Khatou? Okay, wait, when does school start? Next term? January 5th. Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right. January. There we go.
Can I suggest making a when to meet and then sending it an email? Maybe we could fill that out. Yeah, the when to meet.
We
If you guys
can.
are familiar with that.
We can, but I just want to have our first meeting like cemented, and then, okay, I think we'd be missing Dr. Zhao, I guess, but can we schedule our first winter meeting for next semester, January 9th at 1:30, which is a Friday, January 9th at 1:30, and then on that meeting we will have the winter meeting schedule be the first thing to discuss. Is that okay?
Sorry, at 1:30 or at 2:30, because then we'd be missing Director Bilodeau too.
Dr.
from the-
Oh, well, 2:30, there we go. Friday, January 9th, yeah.
So I'm cool with that. I'm curious, you just asked for the DIC report to be at the first board meeting. Is that enough time during exams and the first week of classes to get a report done?
No, I meant for the winter meeting schedule.
I understand.
Oh, and the DIC
But
report.
before you said you wanted it at the first January meeting, which is this same meeting, right? So-
Yes. Well, depends, yeah.
Okay.
If, yeah, that is the goal, so we can get back on track with the schedules. Okay, let's have Friday, January 9th for 2:30 p.m. As our first board meeting, and then we will have the winter meeting schedule be the first thing to discuss on that meeting, okay? All right, so can I have a motion that the Board of Directors approves the Friday, January 9th at 2:30 p.m. for our first board meeting? Motion by Dr. Khattab, seconded by Dr. Zhao. Is there any discussion on the matter? Dr. Zhao, do you have something to say? No? Okay. Then can we proceed to voting? All those opposed? All of those in favor? Again? Okay. Okay, and all those opposed? No? Okay. Abstaining, sorry. All those abstaining? Motion passes 0-0 to 9. Sorry, guys. Long day. Okay, and with that, I believe we will be proceeding to the in-camera session. So can I have a motion that the Board of Directors proceeds to the in-camera session? Yeah?
Ryan has to go to that meeting, so he's hoping that he can be excluded from the in-camera meeting.
Oh, okay. Okay. So can I have a motion that the Board of Directors excludes President Joby from the in-camera meeting? Motion by Dr. Khattab, seconded by Dr. Shigano. Is there any discussion on the matter? No? Okay. Then let's proceed to voting. All those opposed? All those abstaining? And all those in favor?
Happy winter break, everyone.